Thank you, welcome, Oki, Idamik Sistiku. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. The title of my presentation is called Niitsitaapyaapii, Improving Well-Being in Blackfoot Youth through Siksikaitsiipowahsin, and that's the Blackfoot language learning. My name is Lisa Croshoe. I have a Bachelor's of Education degree, a Master's in Education, and I'm a PhD candidate close to the end of my research. And the elders that are part of the work that I'm doing there's three of them seated in the front. Shirley Croshoe is one of my elders, Joanne Yellowhorn, and Herman Manyguns. And we're looking for the fourth. We think he might be lost in Browning, so we're hoping he makes his way here. And that's Wallace Yellowface. Eric Croshoe sends his regrets, and so we'll get started. So part of what we know and how we understand and do things, so our Siksikaitsiipowahsin, we offer our elders, our knowledge keepers, tobacco, because we always ask for blessings, even though we had Calvin Williams pray at the other session. For us, it's about the work we do, especially when we're working with our children, Bukaks, Naksanuniks, our grandparents, Omkitapiks, our elders, Ideskinimatstogiks, our teachers, and our communities as a whole. So I have offered Herman Manyguns tobacco so that he can pray for these people in our communities. Each one of our communities is challenged with many things, so I ask for prayers for all of us.
Okay, Kakimak. Tapumana siwa kakanekani päätäpiitsen. Kukkiwa kaakista päätäpiu, kaakanikahkaisa paatuuksa. Marakona vai tuoipuut semmaista päätäpiu. Oki jahtautista piituut siisin nääne kaakanik Niitsitaapyaapii. Ska nohkukkiista päätäpiu. Oki räikohkaa puhuat semmukin katkaksista kuitenkaan. Oki räikohkaa matkuipissa taaps, paakista päätäpiu peneipissa taaps. Tätä kohtuutus puhtaa kaakanik nohkanissa pommuukuikaa. Oki kaakanik tahkita omenaatsa tuossa kaakanik atsummikaa. Oki kaakimak. Jaka heinikistä päätäpiu. Haju ninnään apinaa tuossa. Oki johkaa päätsi katsomatan kaksista kuikaa tämmöistä sikstätsi käyttästä kun. Oki kaak ninnään spjaukumanista kaakanik kukuusiksi yppä sohvahti yppäsi. Oki kippi taamaa kun mikis. Oki niitä kanaspomatyitäpi, jotka tsahkummaatyitäpi. Ja ne kahkiwa kaakit kanavaatyitäpi. Ket kanavammots puhua kaakan kaksista kuikaa. Aino kuu taakkin nääne kaak. Hänik nohkanista kanäpstä. Ipuut juupis pinnään kaakan taakut siipuudis pinnään. Kähkitsis syyvaksen nääne. Oki kaakeni tahki. Jahti toi johtii pinnaan kaakeni tohkaa jaakta vuonna nakan issohtakin naka puukaeks. Oki kaak na ahsen naaneks. Oki ne kumhkitapiks. Oki kaak. Hänik niitä piiminnään kaak äskeni maatstokiiks. Ahki apohtikin kennuams kaapipikani käännässeksi kaap. Oki nuams kaapipikani. Haajust se päätäpiupa kaak. Oki ajaahtuumiksi ei taaps. Kimattuumia mahkumanista tapahtuussa kaakanik Niitsitaapyaapii kookikin nohkanissa päätäpiispinnaan. Essohtakanaka Niitsitaapyaapii manaaksi päätäpiiksi kaakajohtais humanista tapahtuumia kaakanik Niitsitaapyaapii kanakis kohta kaahsennoin ispskikkiiksi kaakanik niin päätäpiiksi. Oki jahtakan näissä kaapia kaakan kaksista kui kanikihka noutui kiipiumahkaa kaak. Oki ahkatsi taamhkanes sapumahkatuumia nika muhsu kuikaa. Katsi taamskitsipsi kaajia kuua oessa kaapäin ujutita piimoa. Oki ahtakan näissä kaapia kaakan kaksista kuikaa. Oki nika naa piiusen. Sopokita piivaas, niin taamipäätä piisen, ahsipäätä piisen kaamutaan.
So thank you very much, Herman. And again, that's part of our Blackfoot protocols is always to ensure that we're getting blessings. Herman prayed for each one of you to have a safe journey home as well after the conference. So take that to your heart. So first of all, I want to acknowledge some of our eminent scholars. For me, these are the people that I use in my scholarly work when I'm writing. I look at Dr. Pepion, who spoke this morning, read through his his PhD dissertation, and see a lot of those work that those initial scholars did for us. They created all those stepping stones for those of us that came behind them. Dr. Eldon Yellowhorn is from our community. He's an archaeologist and chair of the archaeology department at Simon Fraser University. Dr. Gabriel Weaselhead Lindstrom, she is an up-and-comer at the University of Calgary right now and has done a lot of work on treaty-based education. Dr. Leroy Littlebear from the Kainai First Nation, who again has retired and has come back in as a scholar to help people understand our ways of knowing and thinking. And for the next three, Dr. Betty Bastine, she recently passed away. Dr. Betty Bastine figures prominently in my work. I have read through her dissertation as well and the book that she published, looking at how did we start, where did that change and how we were thinking started. And Dr. Pepion talked about it this morning. We're still being challenged by our Eurocentric institutions to put forth our ways of knowing. Many times that we're being challenged not to do it our way, and it's these people that continue to do that. So I deeply acknowledge the late Dr. Bastine. And for me, Bigani Elder Alan Pard makes Gimisukasim. He was a ceremonialist, but he was one of my major teachers, and Kainai Elder Frank Weaselhead Meekskim. Again, two of my elders that I went to over the years to help me know and kind of acknowledge where I was in the world. So from the beginning, this is me from the beginning. These are my parents. So my father's name, my Niitsitaapyaapii, his name is Plume. My Niitsitaapyaapii is Niitsitaapyaapii, standing alone in the water. And these are my parents. This is where I come from. They bring with them all sorts of history and dynamics, Indian residential school. They brought that to me, but part of it was they started me on my journey to be, first of all, have values, and then secondly, to be educated. If it wasn't for them pushing me ahead through my life, like I don't know that I would be where I am. By the way, this is a picture of my mom and dad's wedding, taken when they were 17 years old on the steps of the Indian residential school at 7 o'clock in the morning. They said it probably was just a series of people getting married, taking off the suit, taking off the dress, putting it on the next person, and the next wedding would happen. So this is them. These are my grandparents. My parents died when I was very young, and they are extremely, extremely influential. My grandmother, Nissi, and her name was Missy Yellowhorn, and my grandfather, Ituchgansky, Jack Croshu Sr. So these two people, they lived a hop, skip, and a jump from my house. One of the relatives that lived closest to them. Two coolies take me 5 minutes to get there. I could get to their house, and anytime their door was open to you, you could stop by, visit, get a drink of water, eventually have tea with them, and share stories was one of the main things. Very proud individuals. And on the far right is my, and some of my family members who are in attendance here. This is our grandmother and our great-grandmother, Iki Stanopata, all listening, Laura Croshu Buffalo. One of the things about her is that she, could see a cigarette in her mouth. She lived to be 104, maybe 107, I've heard different numbers there. But she put on okans, and she had like the holy headdress, and she took part in that. But she influenced the whole clan of Croshus. So anybody who has that name Croshu, she was influential to us. Part also with Ikista Nopata, that word all listening really means that everybody sat in front of her and all people were listening to her. She had that influence and that, not the power, but that presence, I think. And she was she is my great-grandmother and the granddaughter of Natu Sinip, brings down the sun. So here's Natu Sinip, and again, figures prominently in Blackfoot here in Browning, but in all of our Siksikaitsiipowahsin territory, him and his wife. This was taken out of McClintock's Old North Trail, and it's around 1892. So we're very influenced by these people that are around us, and when we pray to them. We want them to be with us when we do our work. So this is who I am. I'm Itumitotu. My name is first one there. My journey began at my birth. Napi Natusi made an agreement with me that day that I would accept this life that I'm going to go through. I accepted this life. I've been challenged by many things in my life, but through it all, there's some perseverance and resilience that came out of that. So I am moving towards being this person that has been in education. I've always been around our young people. So the language of my parents and my grandparents always flowed around me. My parents spoke Blackfoot. My older siblings speak Blackfoot. We don't. We were the first ones that kind of went to public schools. But so I understand it fairly well. My grandparents always spoke it. So it was a language that was always around me. Even now, as the elders speak with me, I understand most of what is being said. But I'm still challenged, but I always try to keep that in my heart. I value my life. And so we talk about culture as medicine. I value my life as a daughter, as a sister, as a mother, as a granddaughter, as an auntie, as a friend, relative, and I hold all of these relationships dear to me. My name is driven by time, Itumitotu, first one there. So I'm a good teacher because I was always the first one there. I lived my life by the bell, I always said, but really it's about living by seasons. So we're always challenged by births, deaths. We have celebrations and ceremony, so it allowed me to live a good life with Siksikaitsiipowahsin. So first of all, I want to give thanks to my children. They're very dear to me. Agikina, that's my grandmother's mother's name, and it was interpreted to me as Talks with Spirit. That came to us late. And Ninastago, Chief Mountain. My son is Eric. My children, Inaksinamahka, Little Guns. His great-grandfather went to war in Europe, went to World War II, and came back with little guns. That's how he got his name. My second youngest grandson is Siksikaitsiipowahsin, Iron Boy. We always laugh. We said, because when he grows up, he gets to be Iron Man. And Siksikaitsiipowahsin, which is Iron Shield, and that's my youngest. He'll be 3 on Monday. My family, Donna, Daryl, Jeff in spirit, Lorna, Lionel in spirit, Karen, Doyle, Justin, Tanya. So I come from a big family. Again, the first half all speak Blackfoot, fluent. The younger ones, either we don't speak or we just understand a lot of it. And finally to my grandparents, and I share grandparents with other people that are sitting in this room. So to Jack and Missy, because they were the ones that, even though we were young and we wouldn't listen to them sometimes, they'd tell us to sit down and they'd tell us a story, and they'd come and sit down, have coffee, and I'll tell you a story, even though sometimes you weren't paying attention as a young grandchild, but I give thanks to them. So, Niitsitaapyaapii and Niitsitaapyaapii. This presentation is a story about us, who we are as Blackfoot people. And when we talk about who we are, you heard it from Dr. Pepia, and you heard it from Mr. Heavy Runner. We have a real strong connection with each other. We could see each other, years later, and we'll still have that strong connection. I was telling people in here, I have students that are in the other room that are presenting right now, who I taught maybe 15 years ago that are still really, I have strong connection with. I have students that are sitting in this room as well here that I taught 10 years ago, if not longer. So those kinds of things are important to me. So to me, it's of the utmost importance that Niitsitaapyaapii understand how vital Niitsitaapyaapii. Vital means it gives you life, right? And so when we revitalization means we're giving our language life again. So life is that heart language, and Niitsitaapyaapii is the keystone to ensuring that. And there's times as a student, I get in front of people and I talk about our language, and although I'm not a fluent language speaker, I sometimes think, am I a fraud standing up here? However, the reason I do this is I do it for children. I do it for our young people. And I may not be that person that's going to end up learning to speak the language, but my hope is that they do, because we want to keep it living. We want to keep it alive as we move forward. So Niitsitaapyaapii identity, breath, and heart are values that support our well-being, and this research that I'm doing is grounded in our Niitsitaapyaapii values. And so again, as I said, the late Dr. Bastine really is influential in the work that I've been doing, because I seen her as one of those she was that cornerstone of a lot of the work that especially Siksikaitsiipowahsin's Blackfoot women were and are doing. Sorry, I was having trouble with some of this, but I'll talk about the values-based. I meant my definition is missing. So values-based and language-responsive learning is really what I'm talking about. Values-based means those things that you learn based on the morals and the belief systems of the people around you. So those are really that's what we value. And as we go through life, we pick up different phases in our life. We start valuing different things at different phases in our life. So for me, values-based is what carries through each area. And for me in my research, I'm looking at youth. I want to see what, say, those 12 to 18-year-olds, 13 to 20-year-olds, the youth in our communities, what are they doing and how are they feeling? Language responsive means to learn about the language through or while learning the language. Language responsive means sharing the language as relational, where an elder and knowledge keeper is choosing to share and a youth is choosing to receive. And the focus on positive aspects of the language where it has a purpose and an outcome. So as we go through this, you'll see what the purpose and the outcome are of this. Language responsive is not a word that's usually used in language revitalization. It's usually used with areas such as science and math. So when you're going into and getting a master's or some professional certificate in science, you're going to learn all the scientific terms. You're going to go into math. You're going to learn all the math terms. That's what language responsive means in terms of schooling and education. But it's very seldom, if ever, used when we're talking about language revitalization. So when I looked at this word, I thought, why are we not using it? Because language responsive means you're going to be in the language, using the language, you get an outcome at the end of that language. So values-based language responsive Siksikaitsiipowahsin is not the most common means of communicating for our Siksikaitsiipowahsin youth. They're using English to communicate with each other. They're texting with each other. So how are we going to get them to use a language that they can both share and understand, right? So that's what the outcome would be. And Siksikaitsiipowahsin youth may not be participants in immersive language environments. So one of the things that, and I'll speak to it a little bit later, when we look at the term culturally responsive, it's happening all over our communities. We're quite culturally responsive. We hold sweats, we hold ceremony, we go out and we have teepee camps. That's being culturally responsive. We were talking about, the agokatsin or, okans that are going to happen this summer. The different societies like the Kinatsumitaks. However, not all children and youth get to participate in that. So those that are not participating, how do they get to participate in language that's rich in values? So this is part of the work that I'm doing. So values-based language responsive learning is grounded in my indigeneity as a Pikanaki. So I'm from, Abotsi Pikani. I'm a practitioner of Blackfoot ceremony and I participate in that. I've been in the education system, K-12, for 30 plus years. And so I really value our young people because they are what's going to bring us, forward as our, as our communities. So I really wanted to see what's happening. Why are we not producing fluent speakers? It is it has been placed on the shoulders of our education systems, whether it's K-12 or post-secondary, to be the producers of fluent speakers. And that's a tough order to fill. So what we're doing now is looking at how else can they learn, because it cannot just be the schools that are responsible for what's happening. And most often school curriculum that discusses well-being is being discussed in health classes or a separate phys ed class or something along that line. So there's no real addressing our values as Siksikaitsiipowahsin people. And so again, looking at it, when I look back and I reflect on the years that I taught, I've seen it presented on. A student might get it once or twice a year, a semester, but to actually have something that they could reflect back on is something that should be a real significant marker for us that we're looking at and looking forward to. So we need to expand beyond what is known as in schools, language as subject. You go into a 20-minute block, you learn language, and then you move back into English-speaking class. That's language as subject. So we need to move beyond our language as subject and kind of expand beyond the written curriculum that is often imposed on us by government. In Alberta, it's the Alberta Education Program of Studies. It tells us from kindergarten to grade 12, this is what you're going to learn, I'm like, that doesn't make sense to us, because that's not how we traditionally learned language. So for me, we talked about, Dr. Peppian talked about, how do we change that? So for me, one of the ways to change that is by using storytelling. We all know the value of storytelling. It is probably one of the most instrumental ways of learning for us. And so for me, using our elders and our knowledge keepers as that conduit of learning something new, learning something that is not being seen as in school. And quite often, school curriculum, as put out by government, is a study of non-relational, isolated Blackfoot words with little to no innate value. So I look at words like numbers. And sometimes my elders will slap my hand and say, no, be careful about what you say. But I think about the comments that I've heard through the years, when children come out of a grade 12 system and they say, I just learned to count, I learned the days of the weeks, I know the colors, I know weather. But that's not, to me, that's not relational. I have no relation with the number 2. I have no relation with the number 7, right? So for us, new curriculum would embrace innate or natural Siksikaitsiipowahsin values and would have as its foundational concept a language responsive curriculum. So I'm going to go through this part around culturally responsive learning all over, and I think it was most being written about in the United States, the Navajos, the Hopis. There was tribes in Alaska that were writing about it, and it started becoming more of a globally accepted term with culturally responsive, but it's improving a youth's well-being because they are participating in cultural experiences. So for me, by extension of that, if they were participating in language responsive activities, that we might find some similar outcomes, that they might start feeling better, feeling well, feeling stronger. And to me, to do that, it's through storytelling as the essence of Siksikaitsiipowahsin, and as transferred by our elders to us as they speak with us. So for this reason, I rely on Siksikaitsiipowahsin voices, whose voices and heart stories explain the importance of storytelling as methodology. When Dr. Peppian was talking this morning, he was talking about community-based action research. Action research, that's a methodology. For me, and I study at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, we went in and we said, there's a cohort of us. We're not willing to do participatory action research. We're not willing to go and put a methodology there that doesn't fit who we are. So we pushed back with the university and with our supervisor, who was on board all the way, and said, we want to use what we know to be true. And for Siksikaitsiipowahsin, that's storytelling. So for me, storytelling is my methodology. So I'm going to start, I wanted to take a break from me talking. So part of the research that I'm doing is I'm creating podcasts for our young people, for our youth. When we go through and we look at what do our youth need using technology, something that they would understand with podcasting, something that they can listen and re-listen to, and you'll hear a little bit of that later. Went through, and each of the 4 elders that you have sitting in front of you, and regrets from Eric Croshu who couldn't come in, they came in and they spent time giving us values. And so we talked about values, what was important to them, what they thought a young person should know at this point in their lives. Our world is very much different than it was even 10 years ago. I think 10 years ago, different values would have been chosen, but at this time, they decided to choose these. Christy Eaglebear, sitting in the front row with my elder, she's my research assistant. She's been working on all the podcasts that I'm doing. There will be 5 finished by the end of July. That's my deadline to finish all that stuff. So our first elder that you're going to hear from, these podcasts are different length. Niitsitaapyaapii, Herman Many Guns, is 59 minutes long. We will not play the 59 minutes. Sorry, Herman. But we will play part of it. But when the podcasts are uploaded, I ask that you go and listen to it, because through them you'll hear a lot. So Niitsitaapyaapii is going to, and the part I'm missing, unfortunately, that I've cut out, you will hear the front end and the back end of the conversation. You will miss the story. And to me, that's although it's the most important part, it does take up a large portion. And he told a very, very good story. One of the things they did is they told it in Blackfoot first, Siksikaitsiipowahsin, then they translated it to English, so English speakers can hear that as well. We moved back and forth for young people between Blackfoot, English, so that they can get the story right away and so that they can understand the phrases that are being used. So Niitsitaapyaapii chose the value of omeitaksin. So I'm going to start this. You could read this as you are going through it, and we will. You can listen to this.
Oki Nixukoaps, Hello, my relatives. I'm very glad to see you today. I'm the first one there. My name is Lisa Croshu. Before we get started today, I want to give you background for today's podcast. I am not a fluent speaker of Siksikaitsiipowahsin. When listening to Siksikaitsiipowahsin, I understand most of what is spoken, not word for word, but I get the gist of what is being said. What I learned about Siksikaitsiipowahsin, I learned from my parents and grandparents, specifically my grandmother, a non-English speaker limited to single words or phrases like good girl or good boy. These family members taught me values and linked those to how I learned Siksikaitsiipowahsin. For this reason, I bring you a podcast that will attempt to link Siksikaitsiipowahsin with traditional values of our Siksikaitsiipowahsin communities. It is my hope that by creating and sharing podcasts using Siksikaitsiipowahsin to describe our Niitsitaapyaapii values, that our communities, but specifically our Siksikaitsiipowahsin youth, will understand our traditional ways of knowing and learning. Today we have Elder Niitsitaapyaapii, Herman Many Guns, joining us, and I am so pleased that you have taken the time to be with us. Please take a few minutes to introduce yourself.
Okay, Niitsitaapyaapii. Niitsitaapyaapii. Okay, Patsipikani. Okay, Ninna Ansta Pinotui. Okay, Nikrista Ansta. Startskrachkumaki, Wamskapi Pikani to Nikrista. Nachsipsauka, Ganamaka. Okay, Sesinaki, Kenixkoki, Niitsitaapyaapii. My name is Herman Many Guns. My Blackfoot name is sitting behind Eagle Tail. Come from the Cattail clan, from the Piikani Nation. My parents are Edmund Many Guns and Cora Catholic, and Many Guns is from the Blackfoot, Montana. My grandfather is Eugene Many Guns Sr., and my grandmother is Cecile Grassy Water Many Guns. Thank you.
Today our podcast will focus on the Siksikaitsiipowahsin value of ometaksin, to believe, the definition of this word, how it was traditionally learned, the language that embodies the value, and the actions one can take in their life to show the value will be addressed during this podcast. This podcast will start with an introduction of the elder knowledge keeper, then move to a short language lesson of values-based words and phrases that you may hear during the storytelling segment. To conclude, the elder knowledge keeper will reiterate the words and phrases and provide English translation as needed. In discussing the value of ometaksin, to believe, there are phrases that Niitsitaapyaapii will share with you. This is a mini Siksikaitsiipowahsin language lesson.
Okay, without the main ducks. Today, the value I'm going to be talking about believing. First part is to back up you all men. Creator is who we believe in. Okay, all men grew up. All men grew up gods. We believe in our grandparents. Okay, all men to and they got into bad. We believe in our way of life. Okay. Ikaw nga still the bad bits in the dominance. We have so many different values that was given to us to believe. All men do it. Siksikaitsiipowahsin meanings, the Christian meanings, or the king. You believe in your parents, you believe in your father, you believe in your mother. All men do eyes to that gods and things. You believe and you listen to our grandparents, your grandmothers, and your grandfathers. Okay, all men to it's a chilix and no mix, gods and no mix. In no we believe in the stories that were passed down from the beginning of our creation by our grandparents and our ancestors. So believing is one of the main values God made to us. One to believe is to believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Believe what? All made to give Nidani and the Kakakstim Anistika. Okay, it's still Sisto Tski and the Kakakstim Anistika. Starts with that. But believing and understanding what belief means in our way of life is one of the very important values in life. It's the much toxic, the moment to that's bad. If you believe in something that you're being taught, you have a benefit in what you learn.
As Niitsitaapyaapii.
So again, this is the portion where Niitsitaapyaapii tells the story, and the reason there's a black crow sitting up there is he tells the story of this crow who was deceitful to Creator, and as a result of being deceitful and lying to the community, Creator, and because he didn't value the teachings of Creator, Creator changed him into a black crow. So I have that sitting there, and he talks about, tells the story in Blackfoot and then in English as well. But I do want to get to the next part, and we'll listen to about another 10 minutes of this.
It was our sort of our beliefs. And that of passage in our book, it's so all made back so. Okay, today I'm telling a story a little bit about the value of believing. The story kind of relates to some of our ancient stories of our ancestors in the beginning of time. In the beginning of time, Creator in our way of life, it was our sort of our belief system. That as the Creator created individual people. And with this one individual he created, he gave him his power. Then this individual became one of the disciples of Creator, gave him the powers to do different things of teachings and believing in our way of life. And some of the values that was given to us as a Creator, the laws of Creator, that he can go into within our groups of people to teach them the rights and the wrongs and the values of life as people in different groups within our culture. So it was a very gifted gifts that was given to him to help with life. But as in life, he wouldn't accept the word of belief, so in some of our values, sometimes when you don't believe, you tend to stray away from that belief system when it's set down, when these rules and laws were given, and it's given to you to help guide people in a better way. And by not believing, he decided to take his own route in life and make those changes, and I guess in a more simple way to say, he wanted to start doing more sinful things and breaking those laws and using his own judgment and making decisions on how he should teach people. And so one of the things that he wanted to do, he wanted to get into a relationship with a woman, and he was denied that part. So by using his anger and his frustration, and not only he wanted to have his way, he wanted to retaliate back some way so he can get even on Creator and not only on his people. Because at the time when all this taken place, some of the groups of people, they were kind of making fun of him, of the mistakes that he was making and things like that. So he wanted to basically leave the belief system, but not only use his anger and frustrations to believe in people. So he thought about the idea of saying, well, I'm going to come up with a plan, and I'm going to go hide all the buffalo and starve out the people so I can satisfy my feelings of how I was treated. When this was taking place, so they were all in the encampment, that they would all go out and everybody would go search for the buffalo and try to find food for the people, and he would camp right amongst them. So when all the hunters would go out, he would go out with the hunters. But here he already hit the buffalo already, and each time he'd pretend like he didn't know where the buffalo is. So that this one individual kind of kept an eye on him. So one day early in the morning, one recognized individual took off into the mountainside not far from the camp, and was hiding in the pine trees. And while he was hiding in the pine trees, he hid himself very well that nobody would see him, but his focus was on this individual that was hiding the buffalo. He was focusing on this teepee after the person was observing. So next thing early one morning, they seen him getting up.
Sorry. That's not where I meant to end, but Herman is giving the end of that story, but I wanted to really bring you to a point where we start our discussion.
Well, I guess our lake and birds and water animals and everything, the trees and everything is given that spirit. So that spirit there, it helps connect. It has to be connected for us to be able to focus on the things and the values and the belief system that guides us to stay within the perimeters of the bad and the good. So your spirit is always connected, your spirit is always ahead of you, the spirit is always forewarning you. So all these things, what it means is just to keep your spirit intact. That way you become whole and use your better judgment in the things that you do as you move on in life.
Thanks. I appreciate that because I think our young people have missed that somehow, to know that their spirit is where it all starts. That's the beginning of it. And as you said earlier, the beginning point of them learning and accepting different values that they're taught. And I think sometimes our young people miss the values that are being told in the everyday things, but also being told in those stories that had created us, right? Mm-hmm. I think stories about Matapiks and how we became those real people, but we became real people because of the values that Creator had given us at that time. So much appreciated with that. I was going to ask you another question. Earlier you had talked about language is very time and place specific. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I guess our language is there are so many different levels of our language. One of the things on the onset is to say the spiritual language. And the spiritual language is used as a teaching tool. It's making sure that you're connected to yourself as a human being, but also in the spiritual part of it. So there's the spiritual language, but also after the spiritual language, then there's earthly things that vary in so many different forms of the language, and there are specific things, how the language is used, how you communicate with, not only in the spiritual part, but as a physical form of people and time and place and how it's supposed to be used. So the connection is not only within the physical part, but also connects from the other side, from the spiritual part of it, that embeds in not only in your mind and in who you are, but it gives you better judgments and a better understanding, because there are some words that are very specific in how you use the language and how you communicate to the people of the group. It could be groups, or when I'm referring to groups, is back then we had societies, because there was a way of talking to society members. So there was another specific way of teaching those groups of people, whereas when you're talking to family, there's another specific way of communicating with your family or individual people as you're telling them what is some values and what they mean. So there are all very specific in how you use the language.
Sorry, and I apologize to Herman for stopping there, but it really is something that in its entirety is an excellent understanding of values, how they're embedded in stories, but I always try to listen to it through the ears of a young person. What are they hearing when they're talking about this? When we're talking about wanting something and not getting it, when we're talking about deceitfulness, those things that often our young people, are faced with in their lives, how are they going to react to it? What do they do? And again, it's going back to that spiritual connections that you've made over your lifetime. How do you get back to that place for our young people? And that to me is always the ear I try to listen with, is the ear of a young person. So really, in the research I'm doing, I wanted to answer question number 1. Western universities said, no, you have to do 4. So anyway, I did 4, but it really was right from the beginning. Day 1, I walked in, what values can our youth learn through our language? But not only just hearing about them, I want them to be able to say them. because every time a young person starts using these words like ometaksin, then it starts getting embedded in that spirit. So Herman talked about having it embedded. So to me, this was the most important thing. How can they learn that? And again, I chose storytelling as methodology. In each of the stories that our elders are doing, they use that word repeatedly. They use the value of their choice repeatedly, so that a young person continues to hear that, will start saying it, and be able to have it embedded in their spirit. So part of what we do is share our Niitsitaapyaapii values, trying to make things really meaningful, culturally based, and based in the context of who we are as Piikani for us, and our Siksikaitsiipowahsin. I wanted to say this bottom part is important to me. I've heard respect and love being said that they're synonyms. For me, it's love and education are synonyms, because both of those things embody caring, sharing, respect, learning, teaching, and listening. This is everything we want from our young people. So we get it in these two ways, right? And so in the past, sitting in a teepee, we would get love and education, love and learning, love and teaching all the time. And so for now, we're starting to get the same thing through technology. So one of the things that we all share, it's a common experience for all of us, is our children go to school. And when our children go to school, they must be given that opportunity to develop their Niitsitaapyaapii identity. So Lorna Williams, Dr. Williams, is a retiring faculty member at the University of Victoria. And so I had to include some of her messages in there. So when our children were taken away, they took away lots, but they took away our parents' and grandparents' ability to teach, to educate. And when they took away that love as well. Right? So to me, that was a real strong statement that she made about when you take away our first teachers, you're going to take away a lot of the love that we have and how the world makes sense for us. So I really appreciate what Dr. Williams had to say. So going back to telling stories, for me, one of the things we just finished in the organization I work in is we finished some Piikani Indian residential school stories. We did a book. There's 20 interviews by 10 that attended the Catholic Indian residential school and 10 that attended the Anglican. And they really talked about what they lost at that time and how they no longer saw learning as a positive experience. So for them, and we know that intergenerationally, that loss of attachment, that love and education is not there. So how do we get past that? How do we turn back to a place of Niitsitaapyaapii where we're really valuing what we're learning? And right now, I think post-COVID, it's really about re-engaging our young people to want to learn, and having them learn that through education, that we are showing them love, that we care for them in every way. So again, I quoted Pepion in here, but really was Piikani Elder Alan Pard who said this, that to be a part of storytelling, you have to be an active listener. So listening to a podcast for a youth is active. It's making them think. Alan Pard also talked about being a critical listener, being a critical thinker at the same time. Alan wouldn't just give you the answer if you went and sat with him. He'd make you sit with him for 2 hours and you still would try to think, well, I'm still not coming with an answer. Maybe 3 days later, you're finally oh, okay, I get what he was trying to tell me, right? So in our ways, critical thinking is tied to education, but it's also for us something that I think we've lost, is that ability to listen, and that's what stories do. They make us sit and pause and think about what is being done. And I believe in schools, again, that's not happening as much as it should be, and it should be starting to be developed as a skill. Part of the process, I engage these elders. I know them. I say that up front. I know these elders, I've worked with them. They have done language work in our community for a long time. Shirley was here with the Bigani Institute, a long time ago, trying to get the language started in Amskapi Bigani. So for us, language is very important. Again, it creates that vitality. We want to be able to live long. So I think for us, it's part of that. And I really asked them because I knew they were interested. I knew that they could participate, giving time, energy, and be able to travel. And then I tried to balance out the male, female, so they're giving me different perspectives around value. So I really want to acknowledge, and originally I had 6. I have worked with 6. One has not moved forward in their interview, and one wasn't able to make it today. So for me, part of that, what they're doing, and I honor them for doing that, is it takes a lot for an elder to come and sit here and share with us. It's not sometimes easy for them to do. We take it for granted. We want to have them give us their time and energy. For us, that's that story, to be respectful enough to sit and listen to what they're saying. And I told you earlier, I was not always good at that when I was younger, about listening to what especially my grandparents had to say. But really talking about, that, and Herman talks about it quite often, is Bomuksan. How are you transferring what you know to that next generation?
Namnin na onistam sinopautukan nitsista dakina nokalista akina ki notista pitapi ni dates gats ki stats kiniti isa maputsi Niitsitaapyaapii destiny mata ano destiny mata ipokats just from what Bogats Wakati was a me destiny maskio Ikani anyway. Ikani Gasamita Utaki. Good afternoon, my name is Joanne Yellowhorn, and I come from Ikani. My parents are the late John Yellowhorn and Elsie Croshew. The clans we come from are the Lone Fighters clan and the Buffalo Chip clan. And I'm currently working at Napi's Playground Elementary School in Bikani as the Blackfoot language instructor.
Today our podcast will focus on the Siksikaitsiipowahsin value of agakyusit, to be aware. The definition of this word, how it was traditionally learned, the language that embodies the value, and the actions one can take in their life to show the value will be addressed during this podcast. In discussing the value of agakyusit, to be aware, there are phrases that an elder or knowledge keeper will share with you. This is a mini Siksikaitsiipowahsin language lesson.
Okay, kinoktisiko itakutipoi. Agakyusopi. Agakyusopi is being aware. That's what it's been. Agakyusatut kukuwai. Be aware of your home. Agakyusatut Niitsitaapyaapii. Be aware of your surroundings. Agakyusatut kitaniipist. Be aware of what you see. It means do not imitate things that will cause you harm or be in trouble. Agakyusatut tisikois utakarisi itisikois. Be aware of the weather, how the day is going to be. Agakyusatut kititasapupispits. Be aware of what you're riding in. Make sure it's safe. Agakyusatis kititapimits. Be aware of your family. Know where they are at all times. Agakyusatis kitakats. Be aware of your peers and what are they doing. Agakyusatut kitatsuatopist. Be aware of what you're going to eat. Make sure it's healthy. Agakyusatut kitaksimatopist. Be aware of what you're going to drink. Make sure it's safe and it's healthy for you. Ki akakiusatut sa amists. Be aware of medicines and drugs that are given to you. Make sure that they're safe to take. This is what we're told to be aware of.
As the elder knowledge keeper moves into their story, we want you to listen for these phrases throughout. At the end of this podcast, the elder knowledge keeper will repeat these phrases. The good thing about podcasts is that you can return and rewind the audio to listen and say aloud these phrases along with the elder knowledge keeper. Let's set the scene for traditional Siksikaitsiipowahsin storytelling. Agatapi Tniki, telling old stories, occurred at any time of the day when the situation presented itself. But it was most common that stories were told by the evening fires where families gathered together. Igatapi Tniki told of our cosmology, our connection to the universe, to the star people, the sun, the moon, of our ancestors who could traverse both worlds, to the gifts given Siksikaitsiipowahsin, humans, animals, plants, songs, ceremony, and to the values and protocols and traditional laws that Siksikaitsiipowahsin people needed to live in a good way. Niitsitaapyaapii. Niitsitaapyaapii through Igatapi Tniki is an old way and required a strong yet gentle storyteller who would convey to the listener the value found in the story. In this podcast, we attempt to do the same for you, the listener.
Napi ista wakko Niitsitaapyaapii Niitsitaapyaapii. Nidaiohsin nida nanninnakin nitsista. Aiaksaitsiipowahsin ikemmakaapiuhtiteutu makitaapiipoissa. Kenen surpista wakko kinatuapist tätä pipiukinnan. Ja nyt sitä waista matsukinnan. Ja dasukanikinnan no kakakiusik. No kakakiusik itsitä päätäpiis. Vaikka no kassamis niitsiau atuaps. Siitä manista atuaps. No kaisti vatsista ei tsiipojits. Ja kautti utsista piittuvoijo teipuispua. Ki natuapist assamissa manista atuaps. Anista kitapti anissa akakiusatopini päätäpiokseni. Ki ei saa puini kinokastska muksik. Noka niitsi kohvapis pitsu noka okakiusat sautitaapäätäpiispua. Kene notsi jikakim tahtsi istinimatsei puukaats niitsiipoksin. Kimakoputsta piitsisa niitsiipoksin. Kimakoputsta piitsisa niin päätäpioksin. Niitsitaapyaapii. Manahputsi iitastinimaats kotokpuk niitsiipoksin. Aksnoutista piitsimia niitsitaapyaapii. Keneakti akutista piitsimia niitsiipokseni. Hänet ista watspinnan. Niitsistina nanninkin niitsistina ajoksavani no kakakiusik. Kene nistu tänne sitsimst. Mutsi asita piits makukutista piitsisa mu kakakiusini. Paptspoksia on päättäpioksi. Mä maksutsi istutsissa niskään uhtaakin matkuispua uhta wakatuksi. Nuhtsi istahtsi mukaan akakiussi. I was raised in a traditional home. My parents spoke Blackfoot all the time. They practiced our ways. They lived our ways as Niitsitaapyaapii Blackfoot people. They followed the ceremonies. They did a lot of the cultural activities. And they always told us to listen and to watch. To watch so you'll know what's going on. You'll know what's happening. You'll understand. And to listen when you're being spoken to or when you're in a group. Listen. Always listen. By listening, you'll begin to understand what is happening and what is being said. And it was a really strong traditional upbringing I had. My parents did go to residential school, but they were one of the people that when they left the school, they continued their language. They hardly spoke English. Blackfoot was always heard in our home every day. And again, as I said, they were very involved in our ceremonial ways and in our traditional ways. So that's, they always told us to be aware of everything. Be aware of yourselves, be aware of where you are, be aware of your family. Akakyusik. That's why I chose to talk about akakyusik. It's being aware, and I feel if our young people understood what that meaning of akakyusik means, to be aware, that I think it'll help them build a better lives for themselves. If they really understood what the word meant, again, it's going back to your identity. And you can't just teach the language alone. You cannot separate the language from our ways, because the language that's who we are, We were gifted with this language, and that language is what set out our way of life. So I feel that with our young people, if they really understood the term akakyusin, to be aware, that I think it'll help them begin to understand themselves and understand, their purpose in life, and to try and help themselves with, living a healthy life.
The last few minutes of that is a back and forth, like the same thing with Herman and I, some question and answer in that podcast, probably for the last 7 to 10 minutes, again with Joanne, the same thing. But again, listening to that with a young person's ear is, what are they going to learn as they are listening to that podcast, and really about saying those phrases and understanding what those phrases can mean and bring into their lives. So for me, I just put that, in my younger years, I didn't listen to my grandparents, even though they told me to. And I wish now that I had, because I probably would be a fluent speaker right now if I had taken the time to listen. And again, it goes back to that skill, hey? So I just wanted to, I wanted to thank our, the elders that came with me today, and we haven't finished our podcast. There's 5 in total. So Wallace Yellowface is here as well. He's one of the elders that did a podcast. Shirley Croshu did one as well. I want to thank the Blackfoot Community College for organizing this, and I want to thank you for coming in today. As with our Blackfoot protocol, I want to be able to thank our elders for coming in, for taking the time to drive to from Bigani to Amskapi Bigani, taking the time to be here. But I do open it up to, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you would like to say to our elders, or ask our elders. So they came down here. This is the first time they're hearing the podcast. They haven't heard them before. Kirsty and I have been the only ones that have heard them. But again, thank you, and if you have any questions for them. I'm going to ask Shirley to answer that. Niitsitaapyaapii versus Siksikaitsiipowahsin.
Niitsitaapyaapii is, just look at the Niitsi, and that is making reference to something real, something genuine. And Iipowahsin is language, speech. Okay, the other one, Siksikaitsiipowahsin or Siksikaitsiipowahsin, You know, Siksikai is, you know, I guess more a recent term, because that is talking about, you know, when we came, you know, to be recognized conclusive, and then, you know, with the Blackfoot tribes or Blackfoot, you know, so that's what, you know, Siksikaitsiipowahsin or Siksikaitsiipowahsin is.
Agatun Siksikaitsiipowahsin on asgaatustappi. Siksikaitsiipowahsin on Niitsitaapyaapii. Kannesti katsomuksena. Tietenkin tällaista kummuun silloin, ja tietenkin touttuista piisikin päätävissä. Kanssa niitä seurata katsomaan umuoulussa, ja katsotaan niin pujuusia, saako kissoksi se maakohita. Mutta pinnään kissokursilla, sieltä kissokursilla, ahtomaisesti tuossa on kaakalekin, kannesti päätävissä. Mahtsikamtaan ja isso. So sorry about that, but that's the only No, I was just referring to my language as very powerful language. You know, it's going to be always, it's been there since the creation of time. The Blackfoot words that we use and the terms that we use is all connected in a way for our benefit as people, you know, and that's how we communicate. It is true that we should get together as Blackfoot speakers and Blackfoot people, so we could set the path for the future generation, how to, I guess, carry on those values and those traditions and keep them connected into the future, you know, our children, our grandchildren, our people. So it will continue to learn these values. Yeah. But anyway, I'd like to thank Lisa for inviting us here again, and all the people that have participated today. So yeah, thank you.
You know, I work with children in Blackfoot at Brown Middle School, and you see a lot of where you know, we're trying to teach them, but we're not all on the same page, because when I learned it from BCC. So when I went back to after COVID, they had a whole new different way of teaching it and the way it was pronounced, and they're trying to instill it in the kids now, but that was a different generation. I learned from a different older perspective. I learned from just an mother level. So my Blackfoot is kind of different from the kids that are coming up. So I have 3 kids in immersion school here. One of them went, am I saying this right? Because, you know, that's in Blackfoot, it's really hard sometimes to teach Blackfoot when you're kind of like, oh, am I doing it right? You know, because there's not just a set standard there, it's kind of like all over. You know, so it's like, oh, it's kind of hard to teach them Blackfoot and kind of all.
Yeah, and that goes back to what Calvin was saying. And by the way, I taught Calvin's son as well, so I've been out there. But it goes back to, I'll go back to what Dr. Pepion and Mr. Heavy Runner were saying. It's very much Eurocentric colonized behavior that has divided and conquered us. So what that means for us is we're all in our nations right now trying to learn the language. And then within the nations, we have all these other smaller groups. We've never, I mean, we have conferences like this, but to do curriculum, we've never, you know, done that before. So, you know, I don't know, you know, sometimes we leave it up to the upper levels of governance, you know, with Blackfoot Confederacy to do things like that for us, because we all know that government curriculum is not working for us. It hasn't worked for 25, 30 years. We need to do something new with it, so thanks.
I just wanted to make a comment
Joanne.
about standardizing written language, and I think the most important thing is for the learner to hear the language first, you know, to understand the language first, and it also helps them with their skill for listening. And for watching, because I always tell the students, you got to watch the speaker. because we use our hands. You know, we have that eye contact all the time. Whereas if we're writing it, you're not having no contact other than that piece of paper in front of you. And it's not helping you with your learning skills, your listening skills. And you have to hear the different tones of the language to understand you'll just know if it's a joke, if it's a humorous story, if it's a serious story because of the tone of the language, right? So I agree, everybody has different ways of writing the language, you know, and lots of times it's phonetically. Most people, you know, would write the language phonetically how they hear it, you know. So for myself, I don't key on the written language. I'd rather that the students hear the oral language, because that was how language, that was how he was gifted to us, right? He was never written. So I just have to make that comment.
Shirley?
Standardizing the language. You know, in the late 86, 88, we all started to, you know, come together. There was people from Amskapi, Pikani, Siksikai, and Kainai, and Pikani. And we would host these meetings, and we would call them Blackfoot language sessions. And that's where we were cautioned by some of the elders. I used to hear that the old lady, Maya, Yellow Sun from Siksikai, she cautioned us. Paul Smith also cautioned us from Pikani. They said, you know, yes, we speak the same language, we do all our commonalities in Matkune, you know, Kakiskanik, always remember, we all have different places, and that's how we can distinguish each other, and that. Mahkuman is that to continue on. So that's, you know, something that I've experienced and something that I've known. Because when I came to work for Skapi Pikani, I got with the elders. I got, you know, and I asked them, and I tell them, okay, nistumnan, patuk Pikani, this is how we say it, Kistu Skapi Pikani, sa kita, you know. So we kind of followed, like George, Molly, Kickin' Woman, Jess Black Weasel. We had all these core group of elders that, you know, I went to see, and I would ask them, but just so that, you know, the children that were learning and are still the learners today, you know, have that. Okay, we say this, you know, different variation from the other tribes. So that's what, you know, in my field of experience. And
Thank you, Shirley. So a lot to think about when we're talking about revitalization. Again, remember, it's a heart language. We're talking about what it's going to mean to keep us alive as Siksikaitsiipowahsin. So I just wanted to thank you, wanted to thank our elders and the people that are here working. So wanted to thank Christy Eaglebear. She's from Kainai, and she's my research assistant. So again, she does a lot of work with me and for me, and so very glad. But yeah, just wanted to end this by thanking you, asking you to travel safe, and giving you enough time to take a quick break before the next session.